What's up, everybody? Greg Olson back for a brand new discussion here on You Think. This week, You Think is welcoming two of our newest ambassadors, Lauren Chamberlain, Leah Jantzen. That's right, they are joining the team full-time as creators right here on our You Think platform. Lauren Chamberlain, a lot of you guys know her. She's a softball legend. She played her college career at the University of Oklahoma. She was part of that all-time legendary 2013 Women's College World Series team. At one point, she was the NCAA home run leader. She just brings so much value and insight to the world of women's softball recruiting and so much more. Leah Jantzen, really cool story. She started out as a guidance counselor, talking day in and day out with kids about the issues that they face specifically in sports. She is now the first ever mental health and performance coach hired for varsity sports at any high school in the entire country. She's joining the team across all sports to be a voice for you, the parents, pulling from what she hears every day. And this interview, guys, is just really incredible. I mean, they discuss everything from Lauren's upbringing, her history with other sports, and how to reach peak performance, and the current state of youth softball here in America. We've got a ton more content just like this coming your way, so make sure you subscribe right here on our YouTube channel and follow us on all of our social platforms. Thank you guys so much, as always, for watching this episode of You Think, and I'll see you guys next time.
In a sport that is really based on failure, pretty much, right? If you're 70% of the time, you're probably not getting a hit, or, how did you deal with, and especially as a home run hitter, home run hitters are usually strike out a lot. Like, that's just pretty typical. How did you handle failure, or how did you keep yourself from getting stuck in, like, if you went 0 for 4 and, just to get back up to bat and kind of regain that confidence, right? Yeah. Because I meet with a lot of softball players and baseball players because I think it's one of the most mental sports out there. It's a lot. So speak a little bit about how you handled some of your failures and how you kind of would get back in the batter's box and say, okay, I got this.
Sure. One of the most influential people in my life was my dad, and he's still here, but as a coach, he was so big, and he was in my early years. And right from like 8 years old, it wasn't about not failing. It was about, how do you handle the failure?
Yeah, because it's coming.
Yes, it's coming, especially if you've picked softball or baseball. Like, it is like you're failing almost 2 times the amount that you're succeeding. And that's really tough for a kid, especially at, 10, where you're like, I'm used to scoring goals on the soccer field. I'm used to doing things and having positive reinforcement. And now I feel like I'm failing and it's negative, and how do I bounce back from that? So he actually had this, I'm sure you could find it on Amazon, but it was this little portable like toilet, like this little tiny like toilet. And it had this flush, like an active, like you could hear the flush. And I would be so angry. Like, I would strike out. And as a kid, I was the one like ready to rip off my helmet and throw it. And when we got back to the dugout, it was like, feel it, like, take your time. Like, if you're not ready to, flush, don't flush. But like, once you flush, it's done. And it made this sound, like this actual flush sound. And it made us all laugh when we did it. But just that concept of, okay, when you're ready to let it go, let it go. Like, it's gone. It went through the water. It's down in the pipes. Like, you're out. And learning that at 8, 9 years old was like instrumental for the rest of my career, because that continued with me through high school. It was like, I gave myself that walk. If I struck out, I gave myself that walk back to the dugout, or that jog back to the dugout. And then once I was in the dugout, it was like on to the next. And that part of success of softball is so important to stay even keel. Like, your performance naturally is going to go like this. Like, that's just how softball sports work in general. But I like to think of that just even line that I stay on no matter what my performance is. Like, my mental, my heart, my spiritual, all of that stuff, my enthusiasm, my vigor for the sport and the game, and my love for the game, that all stays on this even path. And if I stay even, that performance usually stays pretty tight to that line. But if I start traveling with my performance, if my mental and my heart and my care for the game, all of that, my attitude, if that starts traveling with my ups and my downs, those ups and downs get pretty big. Like they veer from that line. So that's kind of, I always pictured that in my head, was if I can stay tight to that line, my performance is probably going to stay tight to that line too.
That emotional regulation. Parents need to understand it's your kid is watching your reaction. When you come off the field at, went 0 for 4, and they're hanging their head and they're sighing, and it's like, what do you think your kid's going to do? So check, I tell parents, check yourself a little bit. How are you reacting? What is your behavior like? They are following you. They are watching you. If you're like, hey, let's get them next time. Let's go to the batting cage. Let's work on that swing. Okay, great. They see that a failure is part of it. And now I tell them failure is feedback. Okay. We struck out. Why are we striking out? We need to work on our swing. Great. Now we know what to do, right? Now we know. Action plan. All right. I'm dropping fly balls. I'm not gauging the ball right in the outfield. I'm not seeing it. Okay, cool. Awesome. Now we know what to do. So I think the parent piece, and your dad taught you from an early age, you got to get over yourself, or you're not going to make it in this sport. You're just not. And that failure is inevitable. And I think one of the biggest lessons we can teach kids is how to let go of mistakes. And I think it's one of the most common things I'm asked from kids is, when I make a mistake, now I'm more tentative. And now
that's the biggest. Like they're scared to make a mistake. They don't want to fail.
They don't want to fail. They're embarrassed in front of their teammates. They don't want to let down their coaches. They don't want to let down their parents, whoever, because everyone is so invested in this process of them as an athlete, right? Again, back to that expectation and investment. It's okay if you're not a superstar. There are other ways you can use this sport. You're learning all the other good things about what you're doing in your sport, being with your team, learning how to be coached, getting over failure. Like there's so many lessons to it. The end result isn't always, Oklahoma or like, playing it, like that D1 recruit, that D1 status, or that top, Big Ten school. So we have to temper the parents, like their vision of what's happening here. But I'm finding what I'm seeing a lot of is because the parents are buying in at a young age. Now they're doing travel ball at 10 and 11 and 12. By the time they get into 16, 17, junior and high school, they're all in on this. I call it chasing the dream. And their reality is so skewed, Lauren, that having those conversations with parents it just goes nowhere, because I'm finding that a lot. So I don't know who can help, again, a third party like myself can help sort of broker that situation and say, hey, okay, like what's the outcome we really want here? So do you have conversations with parents? Like, are you able to give them that reality check that they might need in order to, because ultimately it's going to help their kid. If everybody's got an inflated view of their abilities, it's only going to lead to disappointment. So how do you handle some of that?
Oh, it's always tough. It's always uncomfortable, especially if that receiving parent isn't ready to hear that information. Right. So I think I try to focus on the conversation with the kid, and making sure that they understand that like this journey is your journey, D1 or not, and giving them, examples of D2, D3 NAIA players that are dominating at the professional level. And seeing that some of my best teammates, I didn't see at the Women's College World Series, but as a pro, I'm like, I can't imagine having a better teammate. So there are so many different paths and journeys that people can go on. And I think realizing that, yes, you may have a plan. Yes, you may think you have the steps and you know exactly what's going to happen, but be fluid, be open to new experiences. And this like D1 or bust mentality is not healthy for anyone. If you, on the flip side of that, if you're good enough to go D1 and that's your dream and you want to chase it. Like there is nothing wrong with chasing a dream. But if that dream is not necessarily realized in the way that you see it happening, it doesn't mean it's a failure. It does not mean that your dream is not still changing and manifesting into this new dream.
I love that. I love both of those answers, and I want to jump onto both of them because the first part being like be open to other options, but I like that you showcase examples of other women who didn't go that route and wound up coming to the same end result through a different way. There are other ways to go about getting there.
So many ways to get to your destination.
But again, we're going to segue into social media because I think that can be, we're going to go there in a second.
That's a good topic.
Yeah. And because a lot of what their image in their head, they're getting from social media, but this is what happens. You have to go here and then you go here and then you go there because they're just getting the highlights, right? They don't see the full story of a lot of athletes' progression, how they got there. It's not linear. Like I tell kids all the time, it's not linear. So that's one piece. And then the second piece, which I also love you saying, go for it. Like don't, just because you have a dream and people are telling you that's impossible, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to get there no matter how I'm going to get there. I'm going to find a way. And I love that too. I love to see that grit. And I would never tell a kid, you're not going D1. I might tell the kid, it might not happen right away. You might have to transfer.
Exactly.
You might have to do this or that. You might
it's
have
all in the messaging.
Correct.
I completely agree.
I love what you're saying. So let's segue a little bit into social media because I see a lot of the kids, there's positives and negatives to it. And I wanted to ask you just your initial reaction. Like, what do you see from, I see kids that are struggling with it because it's a lot of highlights and look at me, I got recruited and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then the kids who are not getting recruited are often come to me and say, I feel like all my friends are getting, are committing. And I haven't committed yet. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
So that's like the downside. But what are your thoughts on social media and how it affects like high school students, for example, athletes?
Oh, I am so thankful that I did not have social media in high school. I truly can't imagine like being a kid and seeing some of the stuff that's on there. So social media to me for kids is scary. I don't love it. I encourage any kid I see, like, stay off of it as long as possible. If your parents are keeping you off of it, like, probably for the best. Like, there's just a very negative, unhealthy side of social media. The comparison is insane. And that's coming from even in my adult years. And I'm sure like when we log on and you see, you're exactly right. It's a highlight reel and you see everybody's best moments. You don't see their crying nights. I mean, maybe some people, but you don't see the puffy eyes. You don't see the fights with your loved ones. You don't see the failures. You see the big job promotions, or you see the weddings and you see the pregnancies. And if you're in high school, you see the commitments and you see the, perfect bodies that are altered. I mean, there's just so many things that happen on social media. But in the same breath, I think if it's handled properly and you have a good mindset of it, it can be a very powerful tool with recruiting, and you can connect with other softball players that you may have never had the chance to connect with and form a community. Like I've formed my own community on social media, and I had it in college. And, as much as it can be a distraction, I think there's a good and a bad to everything. But I think if you're going to approach it, especially in high school, and if you're on it, being armed the best way that you can and going at it, with the right perspective and understanding that it's not necessarily, it's a part of life, but it's not all real. Yeah. If you're good with that, like, then I think you can manage it. But I am very, like I said, thankful we didn't have to deal with it, because it just seems to be extremely overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. And I think it's kids also struggle with being authentic, like keeping it real. And how do I do that? But they also want that opportunity to show everybody what they did. Like, look at me, I went 3 for 4. Look at me, I got recruited here, I committed here, I'm doing the box scores and and that can be overwhelming and pressure. Also, the flip side, if they're always posting these great games, now they're expected to do that all the time.
Yes.
They're expected.
It just creates that false reality. Creates that expectation of everybody. When you're the one that's posting it, you feel like, I've got to keep this up. I've got to keep this up because this is what people are used to. And I feel that sometimes. I'm like, even on my platforms, I'm like, I haven't posted in a while. What do I got to get out? Like, it's just like, but that's so whack.
And
like,
we're
that
adults.
Doesn't make any sense.
And we're adults who are fully, hopefully fully evolved beings that are struggling with it. Can you imagine being 15, 16, 17, the comparison, the expectations, and again, and if you have a bad game or a bad day, it lives on. Like, it doesn't just end. It's like this constant reminder. So I do a lot of work with the kids on how to temper that and just sort of look at it for what it is, guys. Like, but you see what you want to see. I want to ask you some questions about playing time. Two-part question. And a lot of comments I get from student athletes is they're not getting the playing time that they deserve. They're frustrated. And what advice would you give a kid who wasn't getting the opportunities to play that they think they deserve, and then they're turning their frustration into resentment towards coaches? And the second part of that question is, have you ever had that happen to you, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, that's a pretty prevalent thing, especially in youth sports. There's always like the superstars that are getting their playing time, and then there's the ones that are kind of like, what do I need to do to get on the field? And to me, I think the number one most important thing is to really look at the situation. Like, take your emotions out of it and really ask yourself, am I the best one to have on the field at this given time? If the answer is yes, then I think my next step would be to go directly to the coach. Now, not my parents going to the coach, but me going directly to the coach and saying, I feel like I deserve to have this playing time. What am I missing and what am I not doing? How can I improve so that I can get on the field and you feel good about me being on the field? If the answer is no, you're not good enough to be on the field, or you're not the best choice, work harder. It's just point blank period. Work harder, put more reps in, study those around you that are on the field that you could be learning from. But really put your working hat on and get on the field. And so I think, like you had said, that resentment starts to build up and you start to feel all those emotions, which are totally valid, because if you're an athlete and you're in sports, you're automatically, I'm assuming, competitive, and that competitiveness starts to get to you, especially when you're not playing. But I do think that taking your emotions out of it a little bit and just seeing the situation for what it is will help you get on the field faster.
I love that answer. And I find a lot of kids are not able and mature enough to see it that way. That's part one. They think they're doing the work. In their mind, doing the work. I'm at practice. I'm doing the right things. The second piece is that having a conversation with a coach is one of the most difficult things for a high school student to do.
So hard.
It's so hard. And a lot of the work I do is prepping kids to have that conversation. The coach isn't going to bite your head off. They want you to come to them, but they're so intimidated, or they think the coach is going to be annoyed. And so I think we as coaches, parents, adults in their lives need to teach them better skills on how to advocate for themselves. Lauren, they think in their head they already have made the decision. The coach doesn't like me. He likes so and so.
Very personal. They take it
very personal. So again, assuming, put yourself in their shoes, and you were there. Did you ever have a situation? I know you were such an all-star in high school, but did you ever have a situation where you weren't getting maybe the time you wanted, or how did you handle that?
I would say that didn't really come until later in my pro career. So my rookie year in the league was a struggle for me. I had just come off of a very high senior year at the University of Oklahoma. It was like superstar, got drafted #1 and showed up and really like had a Kobe Bryant first year and like tanked. And I remember having those just weird feelings in the dugout of being like, this isn't me, but I'm in the dugout and my team's on the field on defense and I'm not in the lineup. And at that time, of course your ego's hurt. You're like, that's normal. Like, so the feelings involved in it are very normal, but it was the response I chose to take. I'm going to invest in my teammates. I'm going to be the best teammate that I can be right now. And I'm going to encourage those that are on the field while I'm spending extra time in the cage, making sure I'm getting my reps in and trying to get back on that field. So yes, it did happen to me, and I was a little bit older, so I felt like I had a better understanding of how to deal with it. But it is very difficult when you see young kids going through that, because their emotions are just, everything is very deep and everything feels very real. And then on top of that, I think we also have parents that aren't really sitting with their kid and helping them navigate that. I think parents have a lot of emotions too, and there's a lot of pride, and this is my kid needs to be on the field. So that sense of reality and really understanding the situation for what it is goes out the window if your parent isn't doing it for you.
100%. And that's a very common theme I see, is the parent is buying into the same excuses. I think we need parents to understand, it's like, just like we tell them, don't praise the outcome, praise the effort. right?
Yeah.
Stop acknowledging only the outcomes and really acknowledge, hey, I saw you hustle out there. I saw you pick up your teammate. I saw you congratulate the other team for their win. I saw you hustle back to the dugout, not the hits, the win, those things. But on the flip side, also coming down on you when you're not hustling, when you're showing, your attitude is poor, or you didn't talk to anybody, you withdrew from the team when you made those mistakes and you didn't allow yourself to be coached and you sulked. Like those are things, those are behaviors. It's like we can address the behavior. So this is what I want parents to understand. It's like those things you can address. You're not commenting on their ability. You're commenting on you're commenting on the things they can control. Listen, you want playing time? Well, not with that attitude. You're not going to get on the field if you hang your head every time you strike out and you throw your helmet or you sulk in the corner of the dugout. So I love that your parents, they were on the mark with you for sure.
Yeah. And so lucky about that. And I know that's not always the situation. And so it's nice and like, it's important to encourage the parents now to be like, hey, even if you started like this, it's an easy switch. It's just telling the parents a little bit like it's not about you. It's about your kid. Like it's not about you. But actually the story that comes to mind from that learning situation was I was in high school and I was playing travel ball, and it was my first big recruiting tournament. Like I'd never really been to a showcase where we're playing games and top colleges, top D1 colleges are there to watch. And I was kind of the new kid on the block. I was late to the party in high school, basically. So I was that kid where I was looking at my teammates and they were all committed and I wasn't. I was playing shortstop, and a really big team that I was like, I can't believe they're watching me, was there. And they watched me, a ball went right under my glove at shortstop, and I was inside just mortified because I'm like, they're watching. Like, how can I miss this ball? It went under my glove. Like, that's the sin of all sins on the field. And from that play, I immediately, kind of kicked the dirt a little bit and was like, we got this, and, slammed my hand into my glove and looked around at my teammates, and I'm like, I got you. And I kept my head up, and I was the response, as much as I felt crushed in that moment, I knew that my response was very important in that moment. And now fast forward, I had a better half of the game, but fast forward a couple of weeks later, I get a call from that university, and they were interested. They wanted me to come take a visit. And I'm like, how? Like, what do you mean? Like, I thought I screwed that up.
All you could think about was the ball under your legs, right?
It was the ball under my glove, but all they could think about was my response to the ball under my glove. They were like, we loved how you bounced back. You had a great second half of the game. You didn't let that deter you from succeeding throughout the second half. Your response is that's the type of player we want. I want players that are able to bounce back. And that was such a confirmation in my head of like, wow, this is good. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing the right thing. And it doesn't mean you can't feel it when it happens. Like it's not deadening your feelings. It's just, how are you displaying yourself after that? How are you bouncing back? And that's what those top coaches are looking for.
That's an amazing story, Lauren.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to tell every girl I meet with.
It's a good one. It was just it was pretty
because I say it to them all
really
the time.
Shows.
Yeah, I tell them all the time they're watching you. They're watching what you do and make a mistake. They're watching how you are on the bench. They're watching how you talk to your parents. They're watching how you talk. All of those things are being observed. So it's not just about your playing. They know you're going to make a mistake. So
exactly, the best coaches and the best teams, they already know, they're expecting you to make a mistake. Like it's okay. So getting that almost like the sting of failure out of the system is so important.
Great story.